The wine dripped from my blouse like blood. Thick, red, silent. For a moment, I couldn't move. Not because of the cold liquid soaking into my skin, but because of the 22 eyes staring at me across Daniel's parents' polished oak table. Eyes that just moments ago were filled with laughter and wedding toasts. Now they held something else. Doubt, pity, contempt. "Jessie!" Rachel hissed, her manicured finger trembling as she pointed at the wallet now resting on the table. "It was in your bag." And just like that, the room went still. The chandelier above flickered once, catching the tension like static in the air. I could feel Sarah's hand tighten around the armrest of her wheelchair beside me. My chest burned, not just from the Cabernet, but from something deeper. Humiliation, disbelief, the sharp sting of betrayal. I hadn't even touched that wallet, but it was there, dangling in her hand, pulled from a tote that sat inches from my chair. How did this happen? 3 years earlier, I couldn't have imagined this moment. Back then, I was just Jessie Carter, a marketing coordinator clawing my way through pitches and product launches in downtown Chicago. I'd grown up in Elmhurst, in a cramped 2-bedroom house that smelled of lavender candles and leftover pasta. After my dad's hardware store closed when I was 12, life didn't get easier. My mom took sewing jobs deep into the night just to keep the lights on. And my sister Sarah, she was our quiet strength. When her body stopped cooperating at 16, her spirit refused to quit. She taught me that grit didn't have to shout, it just had to endure. That grit is what got me through college, internships, late nights folding flyers for brands that wouldn't remember my name. It's what led me to Apex Marketing and to the man I never expected to find, Daniel Hayes. Daniel was already a team leader when I arrived, confident, collected, the kind of guy who remembered everyone's coffee order and never made a junior feel small. He had a laugh like slow jazz and a mind that could take a failed campaign and turn it into a headline. We spent months working side by side, late nights fueled by stale pretzels, cold coffee, and a shared playlist of Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong. Somewhere between brainstorming and client calls, I started falling for him. He was different, not just from other men, but from everyone I'd ever known. Where others saw me as the girl with the thrift store blazer and a scholarship hustle, Daniel saw someone worthy. After 2 years, he proposed by the lake, just as the sun was dropping behind the skyline. I still remember the way the wind curled around his words. "I want a life with you, not just weekends or after work. All of it." I said yes. Through tears and wind and disbelief, I said yes. My family was thrilled. Mom cried. Sarah lit up like a sunrise. "You finally found someone who sees you," she whispered, squeezing my hand with the strength of someone who's had to hold too much. But if my family embraced Daniel like a son, his family was trickier. His parents, Margaret and Robert Hayes, were warmth wrapped in wealth. North Shore money, big house, handmade lasagna, crystal decanters. They welcomed me in a way that made me believe I belonged. But Rachel was different. From the first moment we met, she made it clear I was under a microscope. Her eyes scanned me like a resume. Her tone, too polite to call rude, but sharp enough to cut, made my stomach twist. Marketing? Cute. And how exactly do you two split expenses? Her lipstick was perfect. Her smile wasn't. Daniel had warned me. She's complicated. Divorced, entitled, she doesn't really connect with people. I had brushed it off. She was going to be family, right? I imagined movie nights, spa days, inside jokes at Thanksgiving. I was wrong. Still, I tried. I wanted us to work. I wanted the picture-perfect in-laws, the shared recipes, the family holidays. So when Rachel emailed the day after we met, asking to grab lunch, I said yes. Because maybe she just needed time. Maybe I could be the bridge. Maybe. We met at a trendy little cafe in the Loop. Brick walls, Edison bulbs, the kind of place where people ordered truffle fries without flinching. Rachel arrived 15 minutes late, heels clacking like a metronome of confidence. She kissed the air beside my cheek and ordered lobster rolls with a side of champagne like it was Tuesday brunch at the Ritz. I tried to keep up, ordering something modest, pretending I wasn't doing mental math in my head. The check came. She reached for her bag, frowned, and sighed. "Oh, Jessie, I forgot my wallet. Can you cover me? I'll Venmo you later." Her tone was breezy, effortless, like this wasn't her first time. I smiled and nodded, even as something in my gut twisted. It was one lunch. No big deal. But then there was another, and another. Each time she picked the place. Each time the bill climbed higher. Each time her smile came with a story. Cards left at home, a phone glitch, an awkward moment at the ATM. And each time she promised to pay me back. By the third lunch, my stomach turned when I saw her name in my inbox. "Let's do sushi this week. I found a place with the best uni." There was no mention of the money she owed, just assumption. Entitlement wrapped in casual charm. I confided in Daniel one night as we folded laundry in our apartment. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "That's Rachel. She's always been reckless with money. After the divorce, she blew through her ex's savings. I thought maybe she'd change." "She doesn't even try to hide it," I whispered. "I know," he said gently, "but I don't want to start a war with my sister." So I kept paying. I kept nodding. I kept letting her chip away at me because I didn't want to be the fiancé who made things awkward. I told myself it wasn't worth it until she pushed further. One rainy Thursday, as I was leaving the office late, I saw her waiting outside the building, umbrella in one hand, perfectly dry despite the storm. "Hey," she called, as if this was casual. "Spot me for dinner? I'm meeting some friends, and I'm short." My chest tightened. "Rachel, you haven't paid me back for the last 3 lunches." She tilted her head, that glossy smirk curling. "Seriously? Jessie, it's just a few bucks. We're family. Don't be so stingy." I froze. My coworkers were walking by. I could feel their glances. My cheeks burned. I was no longer Jessie, the capable marketing coordinator. I was the girl who couldn't afford to stand up for herself. Daniel saw it too. He stepped out of the building, his tone low but firm. "Rachel, either pay her back or stop asking. Enough." She scoffed, loudly. "Wow, okay. Guess I'm the villain now." She walked off, leaving behind the sting of her words and the fire in my chest. I wanted to cry, not because of the money, but because it brought back all those memories I'd buried. High school friends who stopped inviting me to sleepovers when I couldn't pitch in for takeout. College roommates who called me cheap because I chose work study over nights out. I'd spent years trying to shake off the feeling that I was less than, that I had to apologize for my limits. Rachel dragged that feeling back to the surface with a single smirk. Later that night, Sarah called. I told her everything. The lunches, the street confrontation, the humiliation. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, with her usual clarity, she said, "You've always wanted everyone to get along. But Jessie, some people don't play fair. You can't keep shrinking just to fit their version of family." Her words stuck to me like glue. I'd spent so much of my life tiptoeing around conflict, thinking if I just stayed kind, things would smooth out. But Rachel wasn't a wrinkle. She was a blade. Daniel held me that night, whispering, "She can't ruin us." But even he didn't know what Rachel was capable of. And I was just beginning to understand that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. The wedding planning should have been the happiest time of my life. Cake tastings, venue tours, finding the perfect shade of ivory for the dress I never thought I'd wear. And Daniel, he was a rock. Calm through chaos, steady through stress. Every time I got overwhelmed, he'd reach across the table during a call with the caterer, trace a small circle on my palm, and mouth, "We got this." And in that moment, I believed him. But no matter how many candles I picked or centerpieces I coordinated, I couldn't shake the shadow trailing me. Rachel. After that confrontation outside the office, her invitation stopped, but her resentment didn't. The emails turned passive-aggressive. A photo of a designer gown with a caption, "What Real Brides Wear." A link to a $500 a plate venue with. Must be nice having that apex salary. Little digs, each one calculated to land just beneath the skin. I didn't reply. I told myself silence was strength. But late at night, I stared at my inbox and replayed the tone of her voice, the way she said stingy, like it was a curse word reserved just for me. Daniel noticed my tension. One evening, while we were assembling our guest list, he said, quietly, she called Mom again. Said she felt excluded, that we're shutting her out. We didn't ask her to help because she turns everything into a circus. I snapped before I could catch myself. That's not exclusion. That's boundaries. I know, he said, but she's painting a different picture. The conversation hung between us like fog. Rachel wasn't just irritated anymore. She was laying groundwork, telling a story where she was the victim and I was the conniving outsider. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. That's when we decided on the dinner, a gathering of both families at his parents' home, a gesture of goodwill, a soft reset. Daniel believed that maybe, just maybe, we could realign things before the wedding. I didn't say it aloud, but I hoped to. Not for Rachel's sake, for my own peace. The night arrived with a gentle summer breeze and the scent of rosemary lamb curling from the kitchen. Margaret greeted us at the door with open arms, her smile genuine, her pearls gleaming. Robert poured wine, cracking light jokes about Daniel's childhood. My parents arrived next, followed by Sarah and her husband Mark, their 2 kids dropping drawings into my lap the moment they saw me. For a moment, it was perfect. Rachel was late, and when she arrived, perfume sharp, hair flawless, and smile just a little too tight, I knew something was coming. She kissed Margaret's cheek, hugged Robert stiffly, then sat directly across from me. Her eyes swept the room, then landed on my dress, white with tiny embroidered flowers. She said nothing, but her silence buzzed louder than any insult. Dinner began. There was laughter, a few too many stories about Daniel's college days, Sarah chiming in with her usual dry wit. I started to believe maybe this would be okay. Rachel excused herself halfway through the main course. "Just the ladies' room," she said sweetly. The moment she left, my stomach knotted. A chill ran across the back of my neck. Minutes passed. Then she returned, face pale, voice trembling, though her eyes were anything but innocent. "My wallet," she gasped, scanning the table. "It's gone." The room paused. Forks stilled. Eyes turned. Before anyone could speak, Rachel rounded the table, reached down beside me, and yanked up a soft canvas bag, the one I'd brought, resting quietly by my chair. "This!" she shrieked, reaching inside. "It was in here." She pulled out a sleek leather wallet and held it aloft like a trophy, like proof of every story she'd spun. I couldn't breathe. Every sound vanished. The clink of silverware, the ticking of the grandfather clock, the soft breath of Sarah beside me. Rachel's eyes locked onto mine. "You thief," she spat. And then, without warning, she grabbed her wine glass and hurled its contents across the table, straight into my lap. The red soaked through the fabric like a wound. Gasps echoed around the room. I sat frozen, drenched, humiliated, shaking with disbelief. Rachel stood tall, chin high, breathing hard. This is what happens when you mess with family. And just like that, the silence shattered. The wine clung to my skin like shame, warm, acidic, and redder than any humiliation I'd ever known. My hands trembled in my lap, the fabric of my dress dripping onto the hardwood floor beneath me. For a beat, no one moved. Not a breath, not a word. Only the faint hiss of the air vent overhead dared to break the silence. Rachel stood above me, one hand still clenched around the glass, the other holding her wallet like a weapon. Her chest rose and fell in triumphant fury. She had it. It was in her bag. Ask anyone. I looked up and saw Daniel's face, blanched, eyes narrowed, jaw locked. Sarah beside me didn't move, but I could feel the current running through her body like a live wire. Mark shifted uncomfortably. My parents stared at me in disbelief, their forks frozen midair. My throat burned. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but the words tangled, caught between rage and the bitter sting of déjà vu. How many times had I been here before? Back in high school, when my classmates accused me of stealing a bracelet someone else had lost. In college, when a roommate's missing $20 bill turned into whispered rumors. Always me. Always the one who didn't fit in enough to be believed. But before I could speak, a calm voice sliced through the tension. "That's my bag." Everyone turned. Slowly, Sarah sat taller, her hands resting firmly on her wheelchair. Her eyes, clear, focused, razor-sharp, never left Rachel's. Rachel's brow furrowed. "What?" "You took that wallet out of my bag," Sarah said again, voice unwavering. "Not Jesse's." Rachel blinked. Her composure cracked for just a second, a flicker of confusion darting across her face before being buried beneath indignation. "You're covering for her." "No," Sarah said, leaning slightly forward. "You walked in tonight and greeted me first, remember? You reached down, said, 'Love the color of your purse.' You sat next to me, not Jesse, and I watched you nudge my bag further under the table with your foot when you thought no one noticed." The room was ice. Rachel's eyes darted around, searching for an ally, but none came. "You didn't know it was mine, did you?" Sarah's tone softened, but it was lethal in its clarity. "You assumed it belonged to Jesse, because you never looked closely, because you never really see anyone unless they threaten your reflection." Daniel stood. His chair scraped against the floor, sharp and sudden. His voice thundered in the quiet. "She's done this before." Rachel's mouth parted, but no sound came. "She's lied about Jesse for months. Told me she was after my money. Said she wasn't good enough for our family. She's been trying to sabotage our engagement from the moment it started." "Daniel," Rachel began, voice cracking. He didn't stop. "I didn't tell Jessie because I didn't want to hurt her. But I should have. You crossed the line tonight." Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her chest. Robert's face turned to stone. My parents sat frozen, eyes wide with the dawning realization that something much darker had been simmering beneath the surface. Sarah's tone hardened. "You're 34 years old, Rachel, and you act like a child throwing tantrums when someone else gets attention." Rachel's eyes welled, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were fury. "You're all ganging up on me," she snapped, her voice pitched high, too thin to carry the weight of the moment. "She's been manipulating all of you. You think Jessie's some innocent little—" "You threw wine at her," Sarah cut in, calm as ever. "In front of everyone. That's not manipulation. That's desperation." Rachel looked to Margaret, but her mother's eyes were glassy with tears. "I raised you better than this," Margaret whispered. Robert simply shook his head. Unbelievable. I stood slowly, the fabric of my dress sticking to my legs, wine dripping from my fingertips. My voice, when it came, was quiet, but it didn't waver. "I tried to be your sister. I paid for your lunches. I looked the other way when you called me names. But this," I looked down at the red stain blooming across my torso, "this is unforgivable." Rachel's face twisted, and she took a step back. "You'll regret this," she spat, venom rising. "No," Daniel said, stepping between us. "You will." Rachel turned on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind her like a final verdict. The sound echoed through the dining room, bouncing off the chandelier, the walls, our stunned expressions. Then silence. I stood there, soaked in wine and adrenaline, but no longer afraid. Not of her. Not of what people thought. Sarah reached for my hand, her palm warm against mine. Daniel whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have stopped her sooner." And for the first time that night, I smiled. The wine dried into my dress like a warning, but the sting of it had dulled. What remained wasn't shame. It was something fiercer, clean, like the moment after a storm when everything smells sharper, more honest. We sat in silence for a long while after Rachel left. No one knew what to say, or maybe everyone did. But no one wanted to be the first. Margaret reached for a napkin and gently blotted the front of my dress, her hands trembling. "Jessie," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." "We had no idea," Robert nodded, his jaw tight. "We always treated Rachel and Daniel equally. Or at least, we thought we did. But she's always wanted more." Sarah's hand stayed in mine, her grip steady, anchoring me even as the room shifted around us. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the wine had stopped staining my skin, but not my memory, Daniel and I sat curled on the couch in his parents' den. The air was thick, with everything left unsaid. "I should have told you," he said finally. His voice was low, filled with a weight that wasn't guilt so much as sorrow. "Rachel's been calling me for weeks, saying you were using me, that you only wanted the Hayes name, that you were trying to replace her." My heart clenched, not from surprise, but from how familiar the narrative felt. The girl from Elmhurst who didn't belong, who always had to prove she was worthy of the room. "I didn't believe her," Daniel added, "but I didn't stop her either. And I'm sorry." I looked at him, and all I saw was the man who stood between me and a flying wine glass, who didn't flinch when his sister lied, who didn't let silence become complicity. "You trusted me to stand up for myself," I said, and I did. A week later, the phone call came. Rachel's ex-husband, Tom, reached out through Margaret. He wanted to talk about Rachel, about the divorce, and apparently about a trail of damage that extended far beyond our engagement dinner. Over speakerphone in the Hayes kitchen, he told us everything. How Rachel had drained their joint savings on designer handbags and luxury spa weekends. How she hosted extravagant parties for people she barely knew. How she got fired from her event planning job for skimming money from a high-profile wedding client. "She promised to pay it back," he said. "She never did. Just vanished. I figured you deserved to know. Especially now." Margaret covered her face with both hands. Robert looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "She's been in debt for months," Tom added quietly. "I think that's why she latched onto Jessie. She saw someone to blame. Someone she could use, until she couldn't. It all made sense. The lunches, the casual demands, the escalating hostility when I didn't fold. "She's not just manipulative," I said aloud. "She's desperate." Margaret nodded. "And we've enabled her for far too long." In the days that followed, the Hayes family did something I didn't expect. They didn't sweep it under the rug. They didn't tell me to forgive and forget. They confronted Rachel, demanded she repay what she owed me, told her she needed to take responsibility for the lies, the manipulation, the wreckage she left in her wake. And when she refused, when she blamed everyone but herself, when she called me names again and accused Daniel of turning on his real family, they made a choice. They cut her off. "We'll always love her," Robert said to me that night, his voice heavy. "But we won't let her hurt you. Or anyone else. Not anymore." A part of me ached hearing that. Families aren't supposed to break. Sisters aren't supposed to scheme. But Sarah's words echoed in my mind like a bell. Protect your peace. Rachel's chaos wasn't my inheritance. It wasn't mine to carry or mend or absorb. I wasn't the poor girl anymore, trying to earn a seat at someone else's table. I had my own now. And the people seated around it loved me because of who I was, not what I could give, not what I could tolerate, but because of the strength I had found in simply standing my ground. Weeks passed. The memory of the dinner faded from headlines in our family's minds, but not from mine. The stain on my engagement dress never fully came out, not from the delicate fabric, and not from the part of me that used to freeze in the face of confrontation. But I kept it anyway. Hung it in the back of our new closet like a quiet trophy. Not of the night Rachel tried to break me, but of the night she failed. Daniel and I moved into a small condo in Lincoln Park. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Bay windows framed the city skyline like a painting, and every night as the lights flickered on across Chicago, I'd sit in the armchair by the window and breathe. Just breathe. There were no more emails from Rachel. No calls. No cryptic texts or veiled jabs. She disappeared like smoke, leaving behind nothing but rumors. Debts she couldn't pay, collectors closing in, a lease terminated overnight. One day we heard she'd skipped town. Miami, someone said. The nightlife always suited her better than accountability. I didn't wish her harm. I didn't wish her well. I just let go. One Saturday morning, sunlight spilled across the hardwood, and Daniel was humming off-key in the kitchen, stirring pasta sauce like it was a symphony. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at a stick. 2 pink lines. Sharp. Certain. My breath caught in my throat. My heart tried to leap and crumple at the same time. "Daniel!" I called, my voice barely more than a whisper. He rounded the corner, hands still red with tomato, eyes instantly alert. When he saw the test in my hand, his grin unfurled like sunrise. "We're going to be parents," he said, pulling me into his arms. "You're going to be the most incredible mom." And just like that, something opened in me. Not long after, I told Sarah. She gasped, wheeled her chair in quick circles around the kitchen island, then squeezed my hand and whispered, "You've always been the strong one, Jess. You just didn't know it yet." She offered to design our baby shower invitations, hand-drawn sketches, personalized details, even a tiny fox in a bow tie at the bottom corner. Her way of wrapping us in warmth, in quiet celebration. As the months passed, the weight of everything Rachel had tried to destroy seemed lighter, smaller, distant. The power she once held dissolved the day I refused to give her more of myself. That was the lesson I carried, more than any stain or memory. You don't owe anyone the parts of you they've tried to break. Rachel did call again. Once. The phone buzzed just after sunset, her name lighting the screen like a ghost from another life. I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline. Daniel looked at me from across the room, his jaw tensing. "You don't have to answer." But I did. Her voice was soft, almost childlike. "Jessie, I'm sorry. Things are really bad. I lost my apartment. Credit's trashed. No one's picking up. Can you lend me a little something? Just until I get on my feet. We're family." For a second, I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who would have said yes, who would have bent until she snapped just to be liked, accepted, safe. But that girl had grown into someone new, someone who knew the difference between helping and enabling. "Rachel," I said quietly, "family doesn't lie. Family doesn't frame you and throw wine in your face. You never paid me back for the lunches. You never apologized, not really. You didn't want help. You wanted control." She sniffed. "But we can start over." "No," I said. "You burned that bridge, and I'm done walking back into fire." I hung up before she could argue, and I didn't cry. That night, Sarah texted me a photo of a sunset, with 4 words beneath it. "You chose yourself." Finally, the wedding came on a June afternoon, with Lake Michigan sparkling behind us like a dream. Sarah rolled down the aisle beside me, her hand in mine, whispering, "You're stunning. No wine stains today." We both laughed. Daniel waited beneath a canopy of white linen, his eyes locked on mine, steady and sure. There was no Rachel, no fear, just friends, family, and the man who saw me long before I ever saw myself. As I read my vows, I felt the baby flutter for the first time. A spark of life beneath my hand. A sign. We were building something real. That night, in our condo, Daniel kissed the swell of my belly and whispered, "This is the life we chose, the one we protected." And as I sat once more by the window, watching the city glow, I knew this truth. I wasn't the girl from Elmhurst anymore. I was Jessie Carter, future mother, wife, sister, fighter, and I had finally found peace.